Campaign 2020 coverage from the Iowa State Fair. And this afternoon, hearing from South Bend, Indiana Mayor and Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. Live coverage here on C-SPAN.
Thank you. All right. Hello, Iowa. How you doing? What a crowd. I see you all the way in the back. Go Irish. Hello. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the chance to spend a little bit of time with you. My name is Pete Buttigieg. I'm the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Some people have trouble saying Buttigieg, so they just call me Mayor Pete. President Pete. President Pete. President Pete's got a good ring to it, too. Well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who I am, what my values are, why I'm doing this, and then I'll make sure to shut up while there's still time for questions so we can have more of a conversation. But I'm running for president because I think our country is running out of time. We cannot keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect it to get better. And the problems that we're dealing with are even bigger than the problems that this president represents. Now, don't get me wrong, this president represents some serious problems. The biggest problem is the president thinks we're all suckers. We've got a country where the gross domestic product is going up and life expectancy is going down. We're in a country where there's going to be 130 million more guns on the streets by 2030, and the average house will cost $500,000. And he wants us to think our biggest problem is political correctness. And his biggest solution is to pass a tax cut for corporations and the wealthiest among us. So we've definitely got problems with this president, but I'm here to argue this president wouldn't be here if we didn't have even bigger problems that motivated a lot of our friends, especially here in the Midwest, to go in and vote to burn the house down. And now the house is on fire, and the real question is what's next? What are we going to do to get this country on the right track before it's too late? Because we cannot go on with 4 more years of what we got right now. I'm running for president because it's time to have somebody in the Oval Office who will stick up for American values. And being serious about our values has real implications. Like when I put forward a plan on Medicare for all who want it, that's out of a belief that it is consistent with our values, that we make sure everybody in this country can get health care, and it's part of what it means to be free, because if you're not free, if you don't have health care in this country. I also think you're not free if politicians get to tell you what your reproductive health choices are going to be in this country. Or if they get to tell you who to marry based on their idea of their religion. I think if we want real freedom in this country, we're going to have to invest in infrastructure, because you're not free if you can't get a glass of clean, safe drinking water or a good road to get you to where you're going. That's freedom too. This isn't just about freedom from regulations. This is about freedom to live a life you're choosing. And freedom comes by way of things like education, which is why on day one I will appoint a Secretary of Education who actually believes in public education. My other priority as president will be to keep this country safe. And we got to have a serious talk about national security, because we have an administration right now that actually cut the funds for dealing with violent extremism on our own soil. And we all know how that worked out. If you're serious about national security, that means bringing this country together. That means recognizing that the American flag's not a Republican flag, it belongs to all of us. And it means we honor the idea that that flag stands for the idea that in this country you are entitled and indeed obliged to speak up when your leaders are doing wrong, and when you do, nobody's going to question you for your loyalty to the republic for which it stands, let alone tell you to go back to where you came from. I've got an action plan to actually do something about violent extremism in this country by giving Homeland Security the tools that they need and by implementing what just about every American wants but Washington can't deliver, which is common sense gun safety reform. If 94% of Americans want background checks and Washington still can't get it done, that tells you something is broken at the very foundations of our political system, and it's why we got to fix our democracy before it's too late. We want to talk about security. Let's talk about keeping Americans safe from gun violence. Let's talk about keeping Americans safe from climate disruption, which is the security challenge of our time. But we can't keep this country safe if we're not willing to name and defeat the greatest threats of the 21st century. And don't miss this. The 21st century is presenting a completely different set of problems right now, which is not going to get solved with a 17th century solution like putting up a wall on the southern border. It's too late. We got to come up with better ideas. Now, at the end of the day, even though we're living in a divided time and a dark time and a bleak time and a complicated time, I'm filled with hope. That's why I'm running for office. I know hope went out of style for a little bit, but I'm here to make the case that you wouldn't even run for office unless you had some sense of hope that it was worth doing, that we could build the kind of future that we're going to be proud of. That in 2030, we're going to be able to look back and say in 2020, we did what it took. That we actually did what it took to deliver an economy where the rising tide lifts all boats. That we actually did what it took to deliver a climate where we're not afraid of what our future is going to be. That we actually delivered an economy and a society where your race has no bearing on your health or your wealth or your experience of law enforcement. And then I'll be able to tell my kids that once upon a time there was this thing called mass shootings, but we came together and did what it took to make sure that didn't happen all the time anymore in this country. We can do that. We can build a country that we're proud of and a future that we're proud of. But it starts by recognizing that the presidency and the campaign is not about him. And we're not going to win going on his show. Because let's face it, pretty much everybody in our party, at least, would vote for anybody who could beat this president, right? But don't let them tell you that we can beat this president saying we're going to go back to normal. Doesn't work that way. There is no back to normal. We got to build a future that's better than the past. And I would say the best way to do that is to begin with leadership that is the opposite of what we got right now. And that's where I come in. I don't want this to be all monologue. Let's have a conversation. Any questions out there? Yes, sir.
Yes, I listened to your speech a couple of months ago about talking about reiterating the transition. You also reiterate the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
The question is about foreign policy and would we re-enter the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think the time has passed for that, and I don't like the way that it would have overruled the American government's ability and American economy's ability to protect workers and environmental standards. But I also don't think the solution is to close ourselves off against the rest of the world. If we really want to compete with China, let's invest in our own domestic competitiveness. Let's invest in our bridges and our roads and our schools and our health, because they're doing it. And they're going to be running circles around us if we don't keep up. So there's a lot more to this than who's selling more dishwashers or poking them in the eye with tariffs that we know are coming down on the backs of American soy farmers in places like Iowa anyway. That's not a strategy. We want to stay ahead of China. We have to actually engage in the rest of the world. But the thing about that is you can either resent the rest of the world or you can lead the rest of the world, but you cannot do both. I'm ready to have America lead before it's too late. Yes, ma'am. What's that? Will I ride? Well, I can't say no to that. Of course I'll ride this slide with your son. I don't know what it means, but I will do it. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The question is about what we're going to do about cancer. And this is an example of where we got to come together as a country to face a tremendous challenge. Cancer took my father earlier this year. So this is personal, and it's personal for all of us. I'm sorry. We're in the same boat then. I'm sorry. But what we know is that we could be investing more nationally in healthcare, in the battle against cancer. And for those who have a diagnosis, far too many Americans are one cancer diagnosis away from total ruin. Now, we were lucky because my dad was on Medicare. And so we didn't have to worry about whether our family was going to be destroyed financially. We were free to worry about what was right medically for our family. I want every American to have that same freedom, and that's why we got to get coverage for everybody. Thank you. Yes, right here.
Hi, Derby. I have 3 teenagers, 2 freshmen in college. Do you have any advice for them?
Wow, yeah. Advice for teenagers entering college. What do you want advice about? Anything. All right. Well, one thing you ought to know is that dish soap and hand soap are pretty much the same thing. So in your dorm room, this is very useful. It took me a while to figure that out. Yeah, you're right. That's better advice. I just want to give you a little news you can use. Please vote. But more than that, and this is really important, and this is how our organizing is going to work here in Iowa and across the country. I'm sure you got friends that you talk about where the country's headed with, you talk about your futures, but they don't believe that voting matters. They don't believe it's worth it. And they will be more likely to respond to you urging them to get involved than they will be to respond to anybody on television telling them to do it. This is really important. So please, if you care about the future of this country, and the longer you're planning to be here, right, the more you have at stake. And whether we figure out student debt, get ahead of the climate change issue, deal with the national debt before it swamps us during more or less your career prime, right? If you care about this stuff, which I know you do, you got to call others to be part of it with you, because our views are popular. It's just that we don't always vote. Change that, and everything else changes with it. Good luck in your studies. Yes, ma'am. How will we protect a woman's right to choose? First of all, I will appoint justices who understand that American freedom includes freedom to make your own reproductive health care decisions. And I will also make sure that we have legislation that responds when states try to act to take that right away. The right to choose could be gone by 2030 if we don't act. I will not let that happen as president. Thank you. All right, right up here. Thanks for raising that. So the question is about special education, IDEA, which is legislation that requires that resources go to those with disabilities in our school system, except it's not fully funded, is it? It's not getting the job done. And so we need to fully fund IDEA. We need to act to get rid of the sub-minimum wage so that we're showing respect for workers and that regardless of ability, you are treated well in our marketplace. And across our system, we got to actually properly fund our public schools so that they have the resources to deal with special education and the basics. This is our future. We're not doing ourselves any favors by going cheap on public education, and it's why that'll be such an important priority for us. Yes, sir. What about Mitch McConnell is the question. There's so many directions we could take that. So here's the thing I've realized. I've worked with a lot of Republicans in my life. And in Indiana, I wouldn't get much done as a Democratic mayor if I didn't know how to work with the Republicans. But in order to work across the aisle, there has to be good faith. And the Senate Majority Leader is not acting in good faith. You can tell. The fact that he said in 2016, as a matter of principle, you'd never vote on a nominee in an election year, and now he says if it happened in 2020, he'd do it. It means he's not even pretending. So, look, there's 2 ways to answer this question. The second best answer is that we're going to box them out because our views are popular, and I'm going to fly Air Force One into the home state of any senator who's blocking our agenda to raise wages, to protect health care, to deliver paid family leave, to improve racial equality in this country, things that the American people want done, gun safety, and remind the voters that their senator's not speaking for them. But the very best answer is for Mitch McConnell not to be the majority leader anymore. And it would help to nominate somebody with coattails who comes from the middle of the country and can speak to these concerns in plain English in the course of a presidential campaign, so that we bring in a Senate majority with us. And when we do, it will be time to put an end to the filibuster that has gotten in the way in so much good policy in this country. Yes, sir. Question is about criminal justice reform, which we need urgently because for too many Americans, the system is not delivering justice at all. We need to cut incarceration by half in this country, and I got a plan to do it. Using clemency powers, working with states, ending incarceration as a response to drug possession. And when we legalize marijuana, which we ought to do, we ought to have expungements as well for people whose incarceration is doing more harm than the original offense did. Creating a whole generation of kids who have experienced the incarceration of a parent, which is a devastating experience to have. We also have to put an end to there being people in this country who stand to make money when more of us are incarcerated, which is why we've got to end private prisons. Yes, sir. Election security, this is so important. If you stop and think about it, as powerful as our government is, the reason that the government works for us and the other way around is your vote. It's not your gun. If they take our democracy away from us, by the time anybody reaches for their gun, it's too late. So we have got to secure our elections. Now, there's a bill pending to do just that, and Mitch McConnell killed it. Because they are embarrassed to admit that this is a problem because they benefited from it. This is not one where we can allow politics into it. We have got to secure our elections. Now, there's technological stuff we got to do, but the biggest thing we got to do is use the security toolkit of the country. That means cyber, diplomatic, and economic responses to create such a penalty for ever messing with our elections again that Russia or any other country wouldn't even think of doing it next time around. Yes, sir.
Plan to ease the burden of student debt in this country to prevent companies like Wells Fargo from exploiting 18-year-olds and going into $60,000, $80,000 in debt.
Thank you. Questions about what we're going to do to ease the burden of student debt. This one's personal because Chas and I, between us, are in six-figure student debt as a household. And if we say that education is the pathway to prosperity in this country, we can't allow it to then be crushing you with the burden of debt. It's why I want to expand the public service loan forgiveness program, which gives you credit against your debt for working in public service, but right now it's almost impossible to access. We also have a lot of these for-profit colleges that specialize in going after veterans, and many of which don't deliver. The ones that don't deliver, we should eliminate that debt entirely because they have basically turned the Department of Education into a predatory lender. But we got to make college more affordable on the front end. It's why we need to work with states to bring down the share of tuition. It's why we got to expand Pell Grants, and this time, let's actually link it up to inflation so you don't have to go back to Congress every time. And work to make sure that low and middle income students are able to graduate from college debt-free and get on with their careers. Yes, ma'am.
About dark money, what would you do about dark money in our elections? And also, are you going to try any fair food? If so, what?
All right. I'll take the second question first. Well, actually, I'll put that to the group at the end. That's about fair food. The other question is about dark money, slightly more heavy topic. This is not a democracy as long as dollars can outvote people. Citizens United was a disaster for this country, and we need reform. There are reforms around dark money that we could do right now. It was part of H.R. 1. Passed by the House. Guess what happened? Went to the Senate and died there. That we should implement immediately. But it's also the case that if it's really true that under this Constitution we can't have common sense campaign finance reform, that's really true, then time for a constitutional amendment to clear this up once and for all, that money is not the same thing as speech and that corporations do not have the same political souls as human beings like you and me. Don't tell me we can't do that. We've had more than 25 constitutional amendments in this country. We had one constitutional amendment in this country so you couldn't buy a beer. And then we changed our mind and changed it back. Don't tell me that we cannot entertain a thoughtful constitutional remedy to secure our democracy so that it actually works for all of us. The other question she had was, what fair food am I about to try? I feel like this is when you're not supposed to go by the polls. You're supposed to lead with conviction. but this does feel like one where I should solicit some input from the crowd. I heard the word pork chop. Like, how many people are on Team Pork Chop? Okay, but if it comes down between a pork chop and a turkey leg, who would go for the turkey leg? Oh, all right. Turkey's in the minority. Got it. Got it. What's that? Craft beer? Sounds pretty good. It's a bit early. I'm still on the clock, you know. Tempting. Somebody said fried Oreo. Is that the right thing to do? All right. Well, I promise to sample as much as I can and offer a thoughtful assessment of the fair food afterwards, because I'm very much looking forward to conducting the research on that regard. I'm getting the kind of impression that our time's about up. All right. If you believe in our vision, I need you to go to PeteForAmerica.com or text Pete to 25859 so we can keep in touch with you. We are building a fantastic team on the ground here in Iowa that wants to get to know you, mobilize our supporters, get the message out far and wide, and with your help, we will not go on his show and play his game. We will change the channel completely. Can I look to you for help in doing that? Then I'm so glad I got to see you today. I will see you on the trail. Let's win the era together. Thank you. Thank you. Folks in the back, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. To stand for freedom, and the idea with Hong Kong was supposed to be one country, two systems, but that's not what we're seeing. And we need a strong voice from the U.S. calling for restraint on the part of authorities and speaking to the aspirations of the people in Hong Kong who are seeking freedom. And we should be there for them at a moment when, unfortunately, America is withdrawing from the world. This is one where we need to be a clear moral voice.
Recognition to Golan Heights.
Mayor, right here, Barbara.
Mayor, you mentioned the need to not have Mitch McConnell be the Senate Majority Leader. What do you tell Democrats, especially some of the other presidential hopefuls who are being asked to consider running for the Senate instead of running for president?
Well, I'm not going to weigh in on what any of my competitors ought to do, other than to say that we've got to win back the Senate. And as a candidate in 2020, it'll be my focus as a nominee to do everything I can to bring in a Senate majority, because the next president's going to need one.
Mayor, would you keep on getting rural America to vote for you as they were heavily supporters of Trump in the last election?
Well, I think rural America is beginning to see all the ways in which they are being neglected by this administration. A lot of lip service
disservice to rural America, but you look at everything from policies that have eviscerated the soy industry here to a Secretary of Agriculture who says farmers are whiners, and you begin to realize they don't actually care. It's very similar to what we've seen with workers. A lot of talk about doing things for workers, and then the biggest achievement they have legislatively is a tax cut for corporations and the wealthiest. Rural America is hurting right now. Farm income's down half of what it was 5 years ago, and these policies are making it worse. So we may not be able to win everybody over, but I absolutely believe in campaigning, as we'll be doing the next few days, in rural areas, especially because we have a plan to help grow jobs, to help grow population, and to help grow infrastructure that's going to make sure rural America can actually succeed going forward.
We're going to Priscilla. We're going to Priscilla.
Population with the worker visa. Can you explain a little bit more about how that will work?
Yeah, so the idea of a community renewal visa is based on my own experience in my region of the Midwest, where we realized we needed not just a job growth strategy, but a population growth strategy. And here in Iowa, some of the areas that seem to be experiencing, some of the areas here in Iowa that are experiencing really encouraging growth in rural parts of the state are places like Storm Lake that have really embraced immigration as a way to grow. So this is a proposal that would encourage communities, if they choose, to come together, apply for an allocation of community renewal visas that would allow people to be in this country provided they commit to being part of one of these communities for a period of time. It allows us to grow population, which is often as necessary as growing jobs and goes hand in hand with growing jobs, if we really want to strengthen rural America at a time when it's been draining out in too many communities.
Some of those additional tariffs on China until December, closer to Christmas, to not affect Christmas shopping. Do you think in doing that he undermines the idea that the tariffs are on China and not impacting American consumers?
Yeah, I think once again they're saying one thing, but even this Trump White House knows that the American people are paying for these tariffs. A tariff is a tax, and that tax is paid by Americans. That's how it works. Now, we're already standing to lose more than $800 per household as a consequence of these tariffs, and we are going to feel this. This is going to hurt in our pocketbooks at home. The fact that he doesn't want that to hit at Christmas shows that he knows that he's doing harm to American consumers, but I don't think trying to time it for his political benefit is really going to make much of a difference in the long run.
About denying, green cards to those who are on home assistance. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, we're talking about people who very often have paid into the system, and this is just one more effort to divide Americans, I think, around the issue of immigration. Look, if this administration were serious about immigration reform, they could get it through Washington in a month or less, because the American people are clear on what we want. We want a pathway to citizenship, protections for dreamers, reform of the lawful system, humane treatment at the border, and the right measures for border security. That compromise is already there. It's already been passed sometimes by one chamber of Congress only to be killed by the other. If we had a real leader in the White House, we could have that reform and move on from these conversations. But the White House finds this issue more useful unsolved because we can be divided around it for their political benefit than if they actually did something to fix it.
Hi, Jackson Richmond Jewish News Syndicate. If elected, would you keep President Trump's official recognition of the Golan Heights?
I think, look, there are very legitimate Israeli security concerns. That being said, I would have, in that situation, had this be part of a negotiated discussion. And the really upsetting thing about what was done with the Golan Heights was that it was an intervention in Israeli domestic politics. In other words, the president used U.S. foreign policy to put a thumb on the scale for right-wing allies within Israeli domestic politics. This is totally the wrong basis for our policies. So we can talk about the future of any of the hot-button issues in the Middle East. The bottom line is, when I am president, we will do it not based on U.S. politics, not based on Israeli politics, but based on what is best for the security of the Israeli, Palestinian, and American people.
But you would keep it?
What's that?
But would you keep it?
I'm not going to make any declarations now about the future of that status, other than to say that on my watch, it would not have come about as part of an intervention in Israeli politics.
On gun control, I'm curious, what can Congress do right now? There's a lot of talk about what presidential candidates on the Democratic side would do if they're elected president. What's the role right now for Congress?
Here's the crazy thing. There's a background check bill from the House just waiting for the Senate to do something with it. It's not even complicated. They could just take it up for a vote, and at least they would have achieved something. Either the Senate is serious or it is not. And I hope that as these senators are in this recess at home meeting their constituents, they continue to hear loud and clear that the American people expect and demand action on everything from background checks to assault rifles to countering violent extremism in this country.
Mayor Pete, do you have any comment on Joe Biden's gas last week here in Iowa? 4 kids and as records and then mixed up the two shootings?
No.
Mayor Pete, over the weekend, escalating tensions between Pakistan and India over Kashmir. Who does Kashmir belong to? And as president, how would you deal with a potential war between two nuclear-armed neighbors?
Nobody wants to see escalation between nuclear neighbors in South Asia. And it's one more example of how the world needs a U.S. today that is credible, that is respected, and that can help ensure that there is some kind of arrangement that's going to lead to peace. What's happening right now is provocative, it is destabilizing, and it is not good news for the region or for the world. When the U.S. enters into these conversations, we need to be perceived as an honest broker, and our fundamental interest is in peace and security for South Asia.
So who's
Our last question.
As president, would you like the U.S. to get back into multilateral dealings like TTIP? Is that something you're seeing?
I believe that we can and should participate in trade diplomacy if it is to the benefit of American workers. Too often that's not been the case. I come from a part of the country that was told, hey, go along with these trade deals, the pie's going to get bigger and everybody be better off. Well, the pie got bigger, but we didn't get a piece of it. And that's why there's such anger in my part of the country around these deals. It doesn't mean that we need to close off our economy. There are many ways that we can win, but we have to actually deliver for workers and, while we're at it, farmers, or else it's not worth it. I believe there's a way to do that, but it's very different than what we've seen in the recent years.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Mayor, what's your message to young voters?
It's like so expensive to stay.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to be homeschooling. I mean, we have no other option.
My question on criminal justice reform. I really
There's more
enjoyed your
online on
answer.
that. It's called, it's part of our Douglas plan, so it's everything from home ownership to entrepreneurship. There's a big piece in there on criminal justice, so you can see more in detail.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your
Thanks
answer.
for
Can I
bringing
get a
it up.
selfie real quick?
Thank you, Mayor Pete.
Thanks, Mayor Pete.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
I just wanted to let you know this is the first, your campaign is the first time I've ever participated in the political process.
Oh, well, I'm honored.
Really gotten
Thanks for
involved.
getting involved.
I should Robert Kennedy.
I've been like working really hard to convert, a few supporters every week to convert
Good.
you.
Keep at it. I appreciate it.
I shook Robert Kennedy's hand.
All right,
in
so you're good luck.
1968. No, it was a month before he got shot. Oh, gosh.
What's that?
It was Robert Kennedy.
Okay.
A month before he got shot, I shook his hand.
Wow, so it's around the time of thing that you campaigned South Bend.
Yeah. I told Bill Clinton that in 2016, and I told him, what my granddaughter said to Bill Clinton, she said, what would make America great again was, seeing Trump in Moscow. And that was in, right before Halloween, right before the election that Hillary won. She won it.
She said she's a Kamala Harris supporter.
What's wrong with you?
Just speaking the truth.
He can be vice president and he can be president.
No.
Mr. Mayor, what are your plans for funding Alzheimer's research?
So I think most of it is going to go to the CDC.
Yes, absolutely. It's touched so many Americans. Yeah.
I would just leave it.
Yeah, I have family. Yeah, and it's going to be me and it's going to be my kids.
I see how well organized.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging it. Yes. Good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Can you shake your... Oh, I get in your...
So, first of all,
What year did you shake RFK's hand?
1916 at the Des Moines Airport. And I told Hillary Clinton in 2015 that I was proud to shake the hand of the first woman president. I told Hillary that. And then I told Bill Clinton that in 2016. And he said he ran into Robert Kennedy also by 2016.
What year? Sorry, 1960?
It was May 1968. It was in Des Moines at the airport, and I was 16. And when, sir? And my relatives are from Boston. Oh, good.
Thank you.
My relatives are from Boston. And I grew up on a farm.
Stop on the fence.
Yeah, who's doing? I work at
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm 10 miles ago. We got here from rural.
And we'd really like to be able to see some child care desert talk and wording within your plans, because 51% of America is facing the child care desert issue. So that's a great way to find a way to integrate that. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Can I shake your hand?
Of course. How you doing? Nice to know you.
My next president.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving this way. Sorry all. There you go.
Thank you for answering my question.
Oh, sure thing. Thanks for speaking up.
Yes, my son has Down syndrome, and so it's really important to us. So thank you so much.
Time to do the right thing.
Yes, exactly. Tip on the soap.
I'm going to keep with you. Sure thing. Where are you off to?
Grinnell.
Grinnell, fantastic. I hope we get there in the fall.
Will you take a selfie with us?
Sure.
Back of your selfie. Would you sign my copy of the Constitution? Please, with my daughter. Yeah. We can't open the pen. We're so overwhelmed. This is so cool. Thank you so much.
Pete, thank you for everything that you're doing. Appreciate it. Can I get a selfie? Do you want to get a picture of us? Okay. Thank you. Hey, thank you for everything.
Thank you. Can I get a photo? Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Good luck. Now we have to get out of here.
Oh my God, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Any chance for a selfie? Can I get a picture? Do something. Can I get a selfie?
Ready?
Nina.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next.
Air Force in the house. How you doing? Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you. Can I get a picture?
Sure thing.
Sorry, I'm trying to get out.
Yeah,
Okay. If you wouldn't mind, that way.
All right. Well, good luck to you. This is great.
Thank you very much, sir. Have fun on the slide.
Thank you.
I'm a linguist at the State Department, so you've been a great inspiration.
Yeah, hang in there. I know it's a challenging time.
Can I get a picture with you? Thank you.
Thanks for what you did for the guys.
Thank you so much for running. Can I do a picture? Sure.
Scott? Zorn?
Yes. You will be.
We build it, yes. We on?
Yep, we're rolling. Thanks for reading.
There's someone wants to say hi right behind you. My daughter, Golan. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Look, how you doing?
Good.
Nice to know you. You okay?
Sorry.
Very good. Can I get a picture?
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Mary, picture. Hi. There's a lot of the principles in the Green New Deal, but a lot of the state farmers and a lot of those policies that is. What do you say to those farmers here in Iowa that might be talking about
where we really enlist rural America as a huge part of the solution. If we fail to do that, the continued extreme weather will destroy livelihoods in rural America and cities alike, which is why we've got to act.
And how do you find
We gotta keep moving. I'm sorry, we really gotta keep moving.
Take care.
Good luck, Pete. You go. Oh my God. Thanks for coming out.
Keep that of me. Thank you so much. And who's your favorite cartoon character? Did that not work? Or?
No, that's it. It's right there. Okay. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Seeing you. Take care. Hi, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Mayor Pete, see you at the fair next year.
Sounds good.
That's the big thing. Let's make it happen.
Excuse us, folks.
Thank you. Keep working hard. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming back. Thank you. Nice to see you. Hello. Nice to meet you. Good to know you. I'm Pete. All right, where to?
Mayor Pete. Nice to meet you.
How you doing? Nice to see you.
Could we get a picture really quick? Walking picture? Take it. Awesome.
Can we do a picture?
Mayor Buttigieg. Hi.
President Smith with Golan.
Right.
I have a question. I have a real quick question.
We're going to keep walking.
Okay,
You can keep walking. Yeah.
Will you declare a climate emergency day one in the Oval Office? Climate emergency day one Oval Office.
Most likely.
And number two, do you know that the Dakota Access Pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline is doubling its output?
Would you mind scooting out?
No, I didn't know that, but I'll look at
Could you, yes, please come out against it, because doubling it would destroy things.
Thank you so much.
Hey, quick question. Do you believe in abolishing the Electoral College?
Yes.
You do? So what would that mean for your voters in South Bend, Indiana?
Well, it would mean their votes would count more than they do today, because Indiana's not really on the map in the current electoral college most years. We were only competitive once in my lifetime. I think that's unfortunate. Every vote count the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think you couldn't win with just the Electoral College?
What's that?
Do you believe you could not win with the Electoral College vote?
Of course I believe I We're going to be structured. Thanks again.
The bug tent's that way.
Well, very nice meeting you. Are you having fun today? Good. Did you get anything good to eat? Oh, ice cream, or what'd you go for? Cookies. The fried kind, or just regular? Regular. Regular? Should I try it? That's your advice? Okay, good. Thanks for the advice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to thank you for the positive dialogue that you promote and for being a good role model of progressive and reasonable faith.
Well, thank you. That's our goal.
Pete, Korean War vet.
Oh, nice to know you. Thank you for serving. What branch were you?
Air Force.
All right.
The 38th Parallel.
Good stuff.
Got hot sometimes.
No kidding, yeah. Well, thank you for being out there for our country.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate what you did for us. Hang in there.
Thank you.
Back up a little, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mayor Pete, I have a South Bend, Indiana issue. Have your office here to hold me sometime,
Okay.
please.
Super. I grab that Pete. Oh, sorry. I'll make sure I don't lose it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're here to help.
If you get elected, you'll be the first millennial president. What's on your Spotify playlist?
Oh.
What's number one?
You can look it
What's
up.
number one?
It's called Buttigieg. You can look it up on
But what's your number one?
now.
What's your number one song?
I kid you.
Just anything. What's on
Creedence. It's my walk-off song.
Creedence?
Around the Bend? Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Hi, will you come sign our wind turbine blade?
Oh, I hope we get the chance. Moving around is a little challenging for us, but hopefully we get over there.
I'm with American Wind Energy Association. We're supporting wind here and across the country.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
I have a quick question on rural policy.
Can I just get a quick picture? Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fair.
All right. Which way did the tender look?
Almost any way you Mayor, Ensemble Quick question on rural policy.
Thank you.
Getting closer to the bud tent. Just go right over there. We're tracking the right way.
Here, straight ahead. Here, straight ahead.
In these counties.
Here's what I've noticed. Very rural, very conservative areas are much more open on immigration when they actually personally know immigrants. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Thanks very much. Thank you. All right, so if we can break down this fear in the unknown and actually grow communities, as you see again in places like Storm Lake, where it's very pronounced, places like Elkhart, Indiana, Goshen. How you doing? Excellent. Appreciate it. Thanks, sir. Hi. How are you?
Will you sign my sign?
Good to meet you, sir.
Oh, the cameras are trying
Not that really, but people have been told that immigration is their problem.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Biggest problems in their life have to do with the. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for your answer on the cancer question.
Oh yeah, thanks for raising that. Appreciate it. Thank you. There you go. Thank you.
Your answer creates public buy-in.
Well, I think it creates a way to demonstrate how immigration is part of the visualize how this can be part of the solution to a real-life problem they're experiencing, which is the depopulation of our towns and counties in rural areas, then I think it does change the way we look at things versus when it's all just kind of fear in the unknown.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm best friends with Margaret.
You're fine.
Thank you.
It's coming to you. My name's Pete. I'm running for president.
Awesome. How are you?
Where's home?
We're from Kansas City, Florida.
Oh, okay. All right. We had a nice visit to KC, and looking forward to getting back to other parts of Kansas one day.
Yep, Kansas City, Kansas. I'll take your picture. Yep.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
We had a great time. We ate really good food.
Good for you.
Nice to see you. Hi, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. Why not?
You sure got a bunch of people around here.
That's all right. Good to know you. How you doing?
Some young blood here.
Let me introduce you. Mayor?
Yes.
This is Patty Judge. She's going to be taking
Oh, hi.
Hi, man. We've talked.
Yes, thanks for taking care of us. Appreciate it.
Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Listen to you. Yeah.
We're going to the tent.
Listen to you so far.
Best wishes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. It feels like that.
The first thing you got to do, though, is you got to go past your comment.
Oh, all right.
About that?
Yes, lead the way.
Yeah.
I heard I'm doing pretty well on the
You
phone.
can pass that for yourself.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
No one
That's not considered.
Iowa Nice doesn't stretch that far. You can,
Sir, can I get a selfie with you?
How you doing?
I'm great. Can I get a selfie?
Yeah, just turn around and I'll lean in. And then
Okay, let me.
maybe.
We got a camera on our way. Where are we?
There you go.
See your phone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Get ready to take a picture.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thanks for coming by.
Real quick, because we got to do the
Quick selfie.
There you go.
I do have a question. As a gay man in politics, would you be willing to commend President Trump for his push to decriminalize homosexuality across the globe?
Well, I certainly agree with the idea of decriminalizing homosexuality. I just want them to put their money where their mouth is.
Would you commend him for being the first president in history to be in support of gay marriage
I am your
from the
best
first
fan.
day?
Really.
What's that?
I'm your biggest fan. This is
Well, it'd be easier to do that if it weren't for all of the attacks on LGBT Americans coming out.
Such as?
What's
Which
what's
attacks?
happening in HHS, or the way the State Department's making it harder to adopt people, or kicking trans people who are willing to die for this country out of the military, those kinds of things.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. God bless you.
Veteran to veteran, Pete.
Thank you.
Proud of you.
Appreciate you.
Time to vote.
Oh, here we go. Oh,
Sorry, Patty. You can get out in there.
I mean, you're actually years, right?
Yes. No, you can't do it like that. That's what I do. It's fun. It's fun. Well, close.
I was in Cleveland last weekend.
I'm not going to do this. I'm going to give Mayor Pete
That's even better.
Yep. Right.
So,
And thank you. I couldn't see you from the back, but I wanted to meet you and I'll vote for you.
This is my colonel. All right.
That is your colonel.
This is my colonel. There are many like it, and this one is mine.
That one's yours.
Got your name all over it.
All right, who am I going to vote for?
Vote for whoever you want to. Perfectly okay.
top. We're on top.
Mayor Pete, an old crippled man, has a couple of questions.
I'm doing pretty well.
May die before you give him the answer.
That's great. I'd say I'm tied for the lead. What do you think? I think you're doing really well.
You're doing good.
Yeah.
You're in second.
Everybody vote! for me, please.
Yeah.
Mayor Pete, please.
Hello.
Just a couple of questions.
Thank you.
I'm fine. My name's John.
No, John, Pete.
Are you willing to support a ban on automatic weapons?
Yes, or assault rifles. We'll decide where to draw the line, but it's got to be drawn a lot tighter than it is right now.
Second, I have a question. Why are men involved in any decision making that has to do with women's reproductive rights? It's none of our goddamn business.
Especially when it's all men, like that chamber in Missouri.
Right.
Yeah.
The third thing, most important, if you don't win this time, stay in it. We need you.
Well, we're in it to win it, but we're not going anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, sir. Thanks for serving.
I'd be proud if you were my kid.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
In South Bend.
Oh, you really?
At Notre Dame.
Oh, good. How's the place treating you?
It's all right. Make sure you do.
Yeah.
Just wanted to watch you and chat over the last 6 months. Really helping me.
Mayor Pete. Hi, nice to meet you. Hey, I have a question. So, will you denounce Antifa, terrorist organization?
Yeah.
Antifa?
What's that?
Antifa.
I'm not a fan, although this sounds like bait.
It's not. No, it's just a organization. No, I'm just here. Yeah, I'm just here on my own.
Well, yeah. Obviously, I'm not a fan of violence.
Yeah.
And what I'm worried about right now, though, if you just look at the body count in this country, is the problem of white nationalist violence. To me, that is the top counter-terrorist domestic
really?
priority right now. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Would you agree?
Appreciate it. Yep.
Would you agree? Oh, you agree? Oh, that's good enough.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Mayor?
Isn't that fun?
Right here.
We got a cart behind me here.
All right, we're just...
You
Okay.
can go in. You can go in. Oh, I know. How are you? Thank you very much. Thanks for navigating through the mess. Yeah, you're the mayor. You're back.
By the way, can I ask you a question?
I'm not. I would love to. I've been in some diplomatic exchanges. You know I know it has to be trade stand. And sort of blood buzz earlier. Make sure we say that right here.
Yes, we're going to say hi to Cinnamon.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you a question?
You already signed it. I think you already signed it. My son.
Right by the...
I don't sell them. I'm an Iowa guy.
Could you
sign for my son?
What's your son's name?
Yep.
Thanks for the selfie, too. That's awesome.
Mr. Mayor, can I
ban assault weapons.
It's part of our plan.
Good.
Going to use my card, sir. Take that home with you.
Good enough. Thank you. Good night.
Not very tall, but
Well, thank you very much.
We're really going in the wrong direction.
Someday we'll have.
just gotta pop in.
Exactly.
Can I get a selfie? Of course.
Can I get it out for you?
Thank you. Picture for a vote?
Sure. I love the shirt.
Can I join in? Yeah. This is my son. Yeah.
You're lucky.
I'm not talking about you.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
This is my other son, Francis, for Pete.
Hi, Pete. Nice to meet you. Have a picture. Thank you. I'd love to see you. Oh, very good. Thanks for
We
will, believe me, we'll be alone if you ever and I was speaking.
Can I ask you a question?
Mr. Mayor,
can I have a selfie?
Sure, if you just kind of keep moving with this.
Of course. Can I ask you a really hard question?
What's that?
How are you going to win black and brown voters?
Sure. So, hi, Pete.
Okay.
Wait. You're a pickup. Yeah.
Pete. The guy's busy.
I'm trying.
Comes out of
He's
two
got a
things.
ball right there.
So, I don't know. I pushed
So the policy revolves around each other. But the big thing about it is actually about themselves, right? So it's why we're speaking to a lot of different organizations. The plan is well received. But, it's on me, especially as a newer right on the scene, to kind of earn that kind of support. I believe in that. It's how, that kind of engagement is how we're going to grew over time. For my first election, my second. But there's no question. When you're new on the scene and you're not, what is that? Okay. Then you gotta get up there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We got a little Notre Dame baby. My wife is from South Bend.
Oh, really?
So.
Ready? Yeah, no.
You get back on what?
Yeah, not as much as I
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Can you open the pen so she's quicker?
Could America learn something from the tough gun laws in Australia?
Say again?
Could America learn something from the tough gun laws in Australia?
Well, it's certainly an example of taking action. I'm not sure that we can do it in exactly the same way, but the idea that when you have a problem, you do something about it is, to me, it's very American. But it's clear, it's clearly what's animated leaders in Australia.
Quick question for you. I'm actually one of the early fans, and one of the things that's bothering me is that your campaign has spent $300,000 on private planes. So how does that is best use of people's contribution, and also how does that is in line with your vision for global warming? Because jets makes the most pollution and contribute to most of the.
Yeah, unfortunately, I find that driving or traveling by train is not enough to get us across the country to meet all the voters that I've got to interact with. Although we, obviously, we try to be responsible for every decision we make. My job is to connect with as many people as big countries as possible.
Even early in the election, we haven't even had the first primary. I understand for the general election, but how about the primary? Well, is it that much valuable?
I'm trying to earn the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, I understand that.
And there are Democratic voters in every state and abroad. Not abroad, but I got to get on the scene. Now, the bulk of it in these early states, no question. But I'm not going to swear off the rest of the country just because it's early.
Yeah, I understand. So can I take a picture with you?
And thank you for your contribution. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, when are you?
Sorry, they kind of cleaned us off. So what do I need to know? You're a fair veteran and I'm a fair newbie.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, all right.
We have a lot.
Now what's our next destination? We got the Colonel down.
We're going to go up here and have you flip a pork chop or two with the pork producer.
By the way, are they showing cattle?
Yeah, we're going that way. We're going first to the pork chops.
Is that under the
Sky Glider?
Sky Glider. No, I think I am. I think I got me a donut with the farmer right there now. Hello, how are you? It's nice. Good night. Okay. How are you? Nice to see you. Where's home? Okay. Nice. We had a great time. Come back. What county are you in? Harrison. Okay. I don't think I've been here. Got any tips on how to make the most of these things? Pretty good, right?
Everything shot. Every time I think about it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Oh, we're big fans.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Your speech
I think good.
Nice to see you. Where's Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pete.
Peter,
Every photo of you is a quick picture like this.
Mayor Pete.
You have to put a number on it. How many genders?
Mayor Pete, can I get a pic? I'm Sharon. Hi. Oh, there. Thank you, sir. Did you go to Harvard? Where'd you go?
yeah.
He's a Yale.
Our Yale fan.
All right, Yale.
Nobody's perfect.
Did you go to the games? Did you go to the games?
You know, sometimes, to be honest,
He doesn't either. So. Bye, Mayor.
How you doing? I'm Pete. Nice to know you. Oh, good to meet you.
Hi, Mayor Pete. I'm Margaret. So nice to meet you. Can I take a selfie with you? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Is it the pork producer tent?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Where we're going.
On the
We
red
can
track.
actually see it.
We can pick it up a little bit.
I do. We got some. I got it. I got a picture with you.
Caroline with you, sir.
I came when you were at Franklin Middle School.
That was a really special night. That was one of the first times we really felt like that.
How are you doing?
Really were on to something.
It was.
It was like one of those first days. Thanks for being part of it.
Oh. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. And thank you for representing my children. I have a son in the reserve, and a son in the guard, and a son who came out as a teenager. And so you represent my kids. And I want someone who represents my kids to represent. It's time. Oh, well.
That makes for some nail biting.
It does.
Still have a great experience.
One of my sons just came back from his second deployment, and he was in Qatar, but the first time he and his twin brother were both in Afghanistan at the same time. Really?
Not from a mom perspective, but...
Yeah, because I've heard that's the Club Med of. So I felt good about that one.
No, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all you do.
Please
talk to everybody. Oh, I do. Thank you.
Can I grab a selfie? Thank you so much. So, your campaign is very important. You know, regardless of the outcome, the fact that what you're doing is very important.
Here we go. Hey, Pete, how are you? Good. Do you want to take a photo?
Sure, we just got to
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
You are in between me and the porcelain.
You might get that beer eventually.
Here we go. We're done.
I'm right there. I'm right there.
Hop right in there.
Hi.
Careful traffic.
Sorry. Nice to meet you. I'm Amanda. Welcome to Iowa.
Thank you.
Yeah, how is it so far?
So far, so good.
Good, yeah. Anything exciting that stands out?
Well, I'm excited about this tenderloin.
Perfect choice. Solid. Also recommend pork chop on a stick if you're going to work your way through. I would be lovely. We'd love to.
Where are you from?
Hi. We love you. Thank you so much. We enjoyed hearing you speak today. Yeah. It's nice to just have a genuine face. We just appreciate it so much.
Thank you for caring so much about our country.
Can I take it proud of you? Thank you. You should stay with us. Stay with us. I pay you up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
can't spoil my appetite for the tenderloin.
There you go.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Hello, how are you? Nice to know you. How you doing? Nice to see you. Can we get a picture? Sure. Got it. Sure. A little left. Thank you very much. A little left.
Head this way.
Left.
Okay, it's about there. Making progress.
Yeah, now we're snuck up on me. Thank you. Hopefully that means, well, whatever. All right. I think you're not that way. Hello. Thank you. What is it? Oh, Clark. How you doing? That's right. Nice to see you. You too. Thanks for wearing the shirt. Okay. Hello. How are you? Oh, you got the whole gear.
Yes,
you do. Of course not.
Sarah, this is Sarah with an H, please.
I almost wrote down with an H. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
We got it. Thank you. You're too kind.
Yeah, I ain't too kind.
Have it in my honor,
Can
please.
I have it?
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah, I know.
Next election.
So yeah, I can earn your first vote.
Yes, I was really worried that I wouldn't make the right decision, but I think that you were giving a lot of good information that I appreciate all what you had to say.
I appreciate it. Hopefully you continue to like what you see.
Yes. Can I get a picture?
Of course.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, fall in bed. Here we go. We made it. All right. Fall in bed. Lead the way, Pat. Patty knows the way.
Watch out for the hot grill.
Bam! Bam!
And our live coverage here at the Iowa State Fair, 6 days of coverage here on C-SPAN Campaign 2020. Our producer Nate Hurst has been there for all of it, and he tweets this afternoon, "It's my last day at the Iowa State Fair. Here's the latest count in the Cast Your Kernel results from our friends at WHO," and they've been doing this throughout the fair. The votes so far in the Cast Your Kernel vote: Democrats, Joe Biden with 24%, Senator Warren 16%, Pete Buttigieg with 16%, Senator Harris 11%, Bernie Sanders 9%. On the Republican side, no surprise, President Trump 97% of the kernels cast, and William Weld, who spoke earlier this week, with 3%. We will have more live Campaign 2020 coverage coming up on Thursday with President Trump holding a rally in New Hampshire, live at 7 p.m. Eastern here on C-SPAN. You can also watch on